whole, supporting community through quality public service. Our agenda today will start off with Administrator Cadwell talking about our communications update, information that's going to be or in the process of being on our website, moving on to vacation rental licensing program, and then reports of Standing Committee on Public Safety and Transportation. So we will start off with communication update.
Madam Chair, if I could, in the interest of the time of our staff that are here, I would ask that we start with item number B and have Bill and Joe give us an update of where we're at related to this proposed ordinance update.
Bill and Joe, then, you come forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, vacation rentals by owner is a subject which has by now become pretty familiar to commissioners and other members of Cook County, other citizens, and that sort of thing. And it's an issue from land services perspective, which is really kind of taking a different form in its own right. It's, as you know, in all residential districts, vacation rental homes are identified as a permitted use. And that was the extent of our involvement with that process. I think over the last couple of years, what you've seen is there's been kind of an explosion of VRBO uses to the point where we, as a local regulatory agency, really were finding ourselves ineffective as far as what our involvement should be. There was questions and concerns about sales tax collection, septic compliance, and things like that. So what's occurred since then is that a committee has been enlisted and a template for a vacation rental home ordinance, which is actually titled Cook County Vacation Rental Ordinance number 62. And I believe you have a draft of that. It's a very short, succinct document, but it really meets all the thresholds that we've identified. For one, the number of VRBOs in Cook County varies, estimates from 250 to 500 if you include Airbnbs and that sort of thing. And those are in conflict with some of the resort industry rentals, year-long annual occupancies and things like that. So what the committee is formulated is that they will go forward with this ordinance. The issue at this point is that there is a consultant involved, Host Compliance of Seattle, which will oversee the permitting process. The original permit request was for a $100 annual fee, and I believe that has been up to $200. And I'll defer to Joe here once I'm done. Joe has a little more familiarity with that host compliance process. So this is basically a really good move from a regulatory perspective. $200 annual fee plus the expectation of septic compliance is in the interest of the county. It's in the interest of the users of the facility and resource. And I think from that perspective, it really makes a lot of sense to go forward with this. The committee itself has delved into a lot of the topics going as far as inclusion of a lot of different business interests in the process. So for us, from an ability to have involvement in a use in Cook County that should be permitted, we're pretty content that this is the right direction and the right process. And do you have anything, Joe?
Well, just briefly, on January 15th, we had a conference call with Host Compliance to try to get an idea of what they had to offer and kind of an estimate on what their charges would be for the services they rendered. And Commissioner Dukirk and Jeff Cadwell, Bob Thompson, Tim Nelson, and myself were there. And the numbers they had come up with, or estimates of the number of vacation rentals in the county, were a little short of what our numbers were. Bob Thompson has put together a list from the assessor's standpoint, because it has to do with classifications of properties. And he has posted those, so we have availability of that complete list. We were supposed to have another conference call with Host Compliance last week on Wednesday. They postponed that for 2 weeks. So we're going to be talking to them next on the 26th, 2 weeks from today. And I'm hoping that by that time, they will have been able to kind of refine their list, get an idea of how many vacation rentals they're identifying, because the number that they come up with is what our initial contract will be based on. And then after the first year, it will be based on the actual number of vacation rentals that are licensed in the county. So we're looking forward to that. In the meantime, Tim Nelson and I have been working on the ordinance. We've got it refined down to a point. It's been looked at by Molly, and also our consulting attorney, Jay Squires, has looked it over. So at this point, we're kind of waiting to see what Host Compliance will have to say, what they will offer. And from that point, we will proceed with finalizing the draft of the ordinance and then getting that through the normal process of public hearings and presenting it to the board.
Okay, thank you. Could you give a broader explanation of how a host compliance works for us?
Well, Host Compliance has a very interesting business model. What they're doing is they will look at a jurisdiction. In this case, they're looking at Cook County outside of Grand Marais. And they're looking at like over 50 websites to find out who is advertising vacation rentals in Cook County. And then that will be the basis of the number will be the basis of our contract with them. What they will do, and this is a question we have for them that we need to get answered next week, is who does the initial contact with the properties that require licenses? Does the county send out letters saying, you know, we passed an ordinance, you're going to be required to license your operation within 3 months? Or does Host Compliance do that? That's a very key question, because there's obviously cost and staff time involved no matter what we do. So, but let's say once we have properties licensed, and in talking with Tim about this, it sounds like we're only going to be focused on properties that are homes and cabins. We're not going to worry about the resorts. Some of the things that we're concerned about are parking, noise, traffic, trespass, and this type of thing, which are pretty much not an issue so much with resorts, because somebody goes to a resort, they're expecting to have traffic and people and stuff. Plus, if there's complaints, they'll handle that internally. So I believe, and maybe Commissioner Newkirk or Jeff would have a better idea on this. I think we're just looking at the private parcels that are owned by people in second homes and seasonal residents up here. And so once these are licensed, then Host Compliance will monitor these properties. If there's any complaints, there's going to be a number that people can call. We'll have it posted on our website, and that will be a number that Host Compliance will handle 24/7. So if there's any complaints, they will take that initial call. And another thing we have to find out is, well, you know, what happens at that point? Will they contact the manager of the property or the property owner with this, or do they contact us? So there's questions that we need to get resolved. But they will do the, you know, after the initial licensing the first year, they will continue licensing of the properties each year. They will monitor for enforcement actions and complaints. We will monitor websites to make sure that any new properties that come online will be sent notice that they need to get licensed. And they pretty much have a complete operation that will take care of most of what would be required, almost a full-time staff person, if we were doing everything ourselves.
So that is a group that's not in Cook County?
Madam,
They're in, as Bill said, in Seattle, Washington.
Seattle, okay.
And, but they
Wow.
operate in jurisdictions all across the United States. Obviously, a lot of them in California because there's a lot of it's near to them and on the West Coast. But they also operate in jurisdictions throughout the United States. One of the things that we need to do, you know, Tim asked me to try to contact some of the other jurisdictions and find out from them what their experience has been with host compliance. Because we don't want to enter into a contract with somebody if at least we don't have any more information than what they're providing to us.
Madam Chair, if I could break this, host compliance is separate from the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. Host compliance is simply a third-party monitoring system. If we were to put together all of the hours that Brady's staff has put together in identifying compliance with lodging tax administration when we're looking at short-term rentals, if we look at all the time that the assessor's office has put into identifying all these properties, their primary purpose is to review the websites that are available and understand who's offering their businesses for sale in a way that meets our short-term rental definitions. Our short-term rental registration ordinance would apply to all properties being used for short-term rentals. Our recruitment and enlistment of host compliance as an enforcement piece would be limited to those things outside of the commercial application, i.e. resorts, because we already know who they are and what they are and how many there are, and we don't want to pay them to monitor something that's a static number that we already have. It would be related more to the turnover, the annual turnover and the seasonal turnover of privately owned properties that are also being made available on the short-term basis. So the purpose of this proposed ordinance is really threefold. One is to make sure that our environmental and public safety concerns specifically related to septic are met and upheld, and that the use of property is not overtaxing on the features of the property. That any required licensing with the state of Minnesota are current and up to date for the use of those properties as such. And then the other primary interest is to make sure that those privately owned properties are in compliance with our taxing regulations in the county. Every time that we've looked at it, tax compliance has been very good. But every time we look at it, it's a point in time. So part of the administration of this is having a rolling point in time to make sure that we have really good compliance with that tax purpose, and that these properties are not given an unfair advantage with the people who are running lodging as a business, as their primary business. The final component of working with host compliance is the concern in the public is that short-term rentals are skyrocketing. The number of short-term rentals is skyrocketing, and they're turning over existing housing stock for purposes, and therefore they're not available to people. We don't have that data. We will have better data on a year-to-year basis if we enlist somebody to help us keep track of this going forward. So this ordinance is about tax compliance, public health compliance, environmental health compliance. It is not about regulation at this point. It's just about licensing so we can manage those two other components. There is the possibility that if we saw that use was skyrocketing, that we would want to address some issues related to density and limit the number of licenses that were available for short-term rentals. We could do something like the city of Grand Marais has and limit it to specific zones and not other specific zones. So we have lots of regulatory opportunities to us, but this ordinance is just about making sure that we have tax compliance and we have environmental health compliance, and that everybody's performing on the same level and has the same expectations. and that we have good data going forward. So host compliance is, as Joseph mentioned, they offer a full suite of services. We have yet to determine which of the menu items on the services we would pick. Are we going to have them be enforcement, or are we just going to have them taking the inventory on a regular basis? Their monthly and annual fee is based on how many of the services we buy and how many of the units that we have. So we could have them do almost everything Joseph said is yes, they have the capacity for doing that. How much of that would we retain ourselves to keep our fees down related to this third-party compliance? We have yet to determine. A lot of the questions Joseph mentioned are exactly the questions we're going to have at that next meeting. When we talk about the price for this license, we haven't said it yet because we haven't determined which of those menu items we're going to do in-house and we're going to have somebody else do for us. I think the last number I saw is if we had them do everything that they could provide every service they could, their cost per year, per property, is going to be $110 to $130 per year, which is why the initially discussed conversation about a $100 licensing fee wouldn't cover that. So the fee has to be reflective of the cost of providing the service. We have to determine what level of service we're going to purchase, what level of service we're going to do in-house. So there's a lot of moving pieces yet. But it's important to know why this is being brought forward. Those who have been involved with the short-term rental committee over the period of time that I've been here know that our needs to understand the scale of this issue have not changed, and that tax compliance and a level playing field for the people who are operating resorts and lodging as a primary business is a big concern to Cook County.
Okay, so let's have any questions or comments to Joe and Bill? Heidi?
So this is a new ordinance, so I need my memory refreshed. So it'd be the Planning Commission would recommend a date for a public hearing to the county board, and then the county board would...
Commissioner Dukert, the Planning Commission will be the first process in the public hearing with a recommendation forwarded to the Board of Commissioners. Tim, Director Nelson, indicated that he wants to get that underway as soon as possible. So it's just a matter of public process, public notice, and involvement of Cook County citizens as needed, according to 1599. So it's a very public process at this point.
Through the Planning Commission, just so the public knows which
Yes.
venue to go through.
Yes.
Okay.
Please let me comment on that. Timing is essential here because the way the ordinance is written, properties have 3 months to be licensed. And the reason we chose the 3 months is that normally in a year for renewals, like next year, they'd have January, February, and March, which is a good time as far as our office goes. Where, our field work is way down. We have more time to spend focusing on this issue. This year is going to be different because by the time the ordinance gets passed, we want to make sure we've made a decision on whether or not to contract with host compliance and what services they will provide. Once this gets published, people are going to try to get their properties licensed. We need to have something in place to do that. We need to have a mechanism set up. And so we want to make sure that the timing works out. So if we have a contract with host compliance, that's in place, they're ready for us, and then we can go ahead and proceed with this.
Okay, I'm going to ask for clarification. When this goes to a public hearing, you're going to have a firm recommendation or a plan on who's going to do what and the fee.
That would be our understanding.
Okay.
But the public hearing is to approve the ordinance.
Public hearing is exclusively for the ordinance, yes.
Right.
It has nothing to do with consultants or anything like that.
Okay.
Consultants are basically the
Okay. And that's why the amount of money for registration is not in it and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. And then the next step would be that we as a board would determine with recommendations of how the procedures would go forward in the fee. So that would be separate, and that would not be based upon the public hearing.
The public hearing is exclusively for the enactment of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I understood it.
The fee is probably going to be incorporated into the county fee schedule, and that's handled as a separate document, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be tied. We need to have a good idea how much we're going to ask for this, but ultimately, that's a separate decision from the standpoint of the board, is how much that fee is going to be.
Brady, if we put that on the fee schedule, don't we need a public hearing for that?
It wouldn't be a miscellaneous fee if it's under an ordinance, but, I mean, you'd be having a public hearing on the ordinance, so.
Just wondering how many opportunities we will have.
But I think we would if we were changing it.
Okay.
So, if I may?
Yeah.
So at what point will you have the costs involved with, this process, or actually the contract with this host compliance?
We won't go forward with the public hearing until we've determined the scope and have a very good idea of
Thank
what
you.
the license fee is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd be very interested in costing all that out, and is that a way to proceed or not, long-term? Thank you.
Question, it sounds like host compliance has already been selected. It doesn't sound like there's been a bidding process for that organization. It seems like there should be some other competitor in a matter like that. In fact, it doesn't sound like rocket science, like some local person could bid on that process.
Well,
I'm just asking the question, Joe, not being hostile here.
I would encourage you to first of all, try to find some other competitors out there. Host compliance, I think, has, at least they present themselves well. One of the things that you need is you need software engineers to write the algorithms for figuring out how you can track rentals within a given geographic area, and they have that. Now, we were talking to host compliance initially because they seem to be able to do the work available. This conference we're going to have next week isn't to set a contract, it's only to get pricing. Ultimately, any contract is going to be up to the county commissioners and Jeff Cadwell to make a decision on. And if we're directed to look at other possible bidders, then we'll certainly do that.
That's a very good question. At this point in time, host compliance is the industry leader. They're the only people out there advertising they're providing this source, but it's a valid consideration when we address all of the ways that we might get this data that we need to make sure we have enforcement capabilities related to this ordinance. We could do it internally.
A second question. On the Article 6 in enforcement, it seems a little bit vague to me. It says that the investigate all violations of the ordinance and notify the owners of violations and direct the property owners to correct violations within a reasonable period of time. I understand that it may be hard to come up with an exact number, but it seems like there should be something, some 180 days, there should be some period, a reasonable period of time seems to, how you can possibly define that as a compliance piece.
I see that as allowing the planning and zoning office flexibility. I mean, if it's a cracked, leaking septic tank, that is immediate imminent health, and it's a shutdown right now. I mean, we have different levels of situations, which by statute have their own timeframes, correct, Bill?
Correct. And can I address that? Because that's a really valid observation. And one of the things that we're doing in land services this year is we're going through not just, we're not just creating a new ordinance, we're also going through our existing ordinance, especially the zoning ordinance, and looking for language that is either ambiguous or could lead to different interpretations from different observers. That's a point. I met with Tim last week, and that was one of the things that I brought up, was just that the enforcement itself, in a reasonable period of time, leaves us as an enforcement agency in kind of a non-winnable situation, meaning, you know, what's reasonable to Joe might be different than reasonable to me, could be different. So that's one of the things that we hope to tighten up as far as the public hearing with the Planning Commission. We have essentially a new Planning Commission in play now who appear to be very intuitive and also curious about this. And from our perspective, it works to our advantage and to the county's advantage to have language that is interpretable as a specific task or a specific punishment, if you will, in that case. So we're aware of that, completely valid, and that's one of the things that we're still, it's a fluid process at this point.
If you read that sentence with the following sentence, is it doing, as Commissioner Dukert possibly suggested, giving the Planning Commission and/or you as enforcement officials, when you find a violation, do you specify a specific correct by date in each case? But this ordinance just doesn't call out that case for all possible violations. Because the next sentence says, if compliance is not obtained within the time period specified. So if there's an enforcement issue and it says, and you issue a violation and you say within a reasonable time frame, for this one, we're putting 45 days, you are specifying it at some point. So this boilerplate language meets a specific purpose, but it might not be exactly the way that we want it to play out. So it's a good conversation to have.
And it like I suggested, it is something that we're still in the formative stages at this point. And you know, septic is a great example. You can have 10 days, you can have 10 months, you can have 2 years to fix the non-compliance. But those time frames are well established and identified. We just need a calendar date, 30 days, 45 days, just to tighten that up and make our jobs easier.
Well, as many of you know, I'm the enforcement officer for our planning and zoning office. And I write letters to people informing them that their property has been found to be not in conformity with the zoning ordinance, for instance. And depending on the nature of the violation, I set a time frame for them to respond to us with permits or whatever. And so we need the flexibility of being able to tailor the timeline to the violation rather than having it specified in an ordinance. And so the flexibility helps us in order to work with people so that we can get their properties in compliance.
Okay. Yes, Brady.
Article 4D, just curious, it says demonstration that lodging tax associated with rental operations is current, and that would just be the payment of the lodging tax. There's no sales tax, there's nothing else that you'll look at other than the payment of the lodging tax, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
That would be correct. Again, fairly ambiguous.
Yeah.
We decided that just because we aren't the collector
not,
of sales tax
no.
or the enforcer, so.
Just making sure. And on the zone district allowed, are there any districts that aren't allowed? It lists all the, okay.
There's two Lucin, LR1, LR2, and then the Tofty Commercial District does not allow.
At all?
At
You have
all.
to get a conditional use.
Minimal, yeah.
And so, so doesn't that mean they could be allowed, or?
Could be.
Okay.
The problem, Commissioner Mills, with Lutzen is that they formulated their residential districts to encompass, more residential use. But at the same time, they moved the vacation rental from a permitted use to a conditional use. So that, it just brings a different flavor to the vacation rentals in those LR1 and LR2 zones.
In 5.2, you are not allowed to have a vacation rental in a recreation vehicle or accessory structure. You can't get a permit for that.
I found that very interesting as well. I had a number of questions. Why not have conditional or interim use for all districts, for all zones?
We can set a standard of you can't do this without the county's permission, but that generally flies in the face of the county's longstanding, come here, do your thing, and without government involvement, save for permitting issues and things like that. The problem is that when you are regulating what is ostensibly a permitted use, then people start to have issues with that. We're trying to be regulatory in the sense that allowable use, permitted uses are identified, and anything beyond that is identified as a conditional use. I don't know if that answered your question.
Bill, how many staff hours go into a conditional use application? And how much time at the board goes into a conditional use application at the Planning Commission?
Yeah, and Administrator Cadwell, that's a really good, probably undefined value, but I can tell you that the conditional use permit process, from initial consultation to submittal to public notice to presentation and hearing, plus a follow-up with the Board of Commissioners, anywhere from between 30 to 60 staff hours.
And we just couldn't accommodate that for 200-plus units.
Right.
Just from that standpoint, the permitted use means that it's an administrative function. If somebody applies for this in a zone where it's a permitted use, it's administrative only, it's a lot less complicated. The conditional or interim use, adding that layer, in here we didn't, but other jurisdictions did, mean that we have to spend a lot more time managing those requests.
Or were you just asking in the LR zones?
All zones.
I was wondering why all zones were not conditional or interim. And I think it was a matter of time and resources.
I got that. But
Okay. And so.
But just in those LR zones.
Yes, the Lucin LR1, LR2, and the top two general commercial are the only conditional.
And I guess I didn't understand why those were conditional.
That is the burden of the township. They
Okay.
are the ones who
Township set that.
created the
Okay.
zone districts.
Okay, thank you.
That was design intent, which conflicted with what the county allowed, so they created their own.
Okay.
And I think there is evidence that they had some misgivings that because the conditional use permit is a burden on the property owner as well.
In Lutsen, we did look in 204, 205, how we wanted to approach residential, and I know that's a few years back, so we can always revisit it again if we need to.
Because with this ordinance and application process, it will be just administrative. There won't be any further public involvement, and history within the city regarding vacation rentals, as well as just people talking in the community presently. There's a fair amount of concern about that, and so I feel like the public wants to have more of a voice regarding what's happening next door. And so I think this is good to get a grip of what's going on and to get some more numbers, statistics, that kind of thing. But I suspect that we'd be moving into a more of a conditional use, interim use situation across the board in the future, but, I mean, we can wait and see how this pans out.
Very generally tricky to limit people's use of their property in a more strict way than is currently required at this point in time. We're not putting any restrictions on the use, we're just monitoring the use at this point in time. And based on the studies that I've done and the numbers that I've seen, while there are individual cases where, I mean, I know a couple of individuals who have been in long-term rentals, and they're not allowed to be in the long-term rentals because they're being converted to short-term rentals. But I largely believe the number of units being converted out of that stock into short-term rental is being exaggerated. And until we have that information, we
Right.
don't have a case to make for regulation as opposed to just licensing.
Yep. Well, that's why I'm saying my suspicions. However, I am curious, please.
Traditionally, counties don't do like what the city does with vacation rentals because of the size of counties and the amount of staff time it takes.
Yeah.
And honestly, other counties are looking at us and our ordinance and whether or not we choose this host compliance as a way for them to also move forward. There are a few other counties in the state. We have the most vacation rentals of all 87 counties, and I think when we looked at it, the next county, we have like 50, or not vacation rentals. It was a huge difference in percentage in population, and so I'm not saying we can't do it in the future, but we don't have the capacities that cities do to do that.
Yeah. I was trying to predict the future, sorry.
Well, I'd like to see your crystal ball.
Yeah, it's under the desk.
Really, the controlling document here is the zoning ordinance. It goes through each zone district and says what are permitted uses, what are conditional uses. And in all the zone districts that we have, which will allow licensing, it specifically says in the current zoning ordinance, vacation rentals are a permitted use. So if we go down the road towards asking for conditional or interim use permits for these, we will have to change not only the zoning ordinance, but we'll have to change the vacation rental ordinance as well.
My other question was about 5.2. In the circles that I run, it's hip to rent out recreation vehicles, and I'm not entirely sure what accessory structure is. Is that just a shack? Yeah. Those are also hip.
And Commissioner,
Yeah.
and Commissioner Mills, and Joseph and I, and Rich Travis and Rich Everson, that's one of the phrases that we're working on, is to make it a specific definition rather than one of interpretation. The other thing is that, in looking at, excuse me, 5.2, that in my introspection would suggest that if it isn't allowed in that context, it could be under section 10.02, allowed as a conditional use permit. It suggests that maybe we need to be specific about that rather than just leave 5.2 as it is.
One of the primary concerns about that is environmental health compliance and having access to appropriate waste facilities. So the two things read together may give us the opportunity for somebody to license something like that. But this doesn't specifically relate to the existing zoning ordinance in a way that's clear.
Well, I'm the one that handles the permitting of recreational vehicles, and I was able to have input in the rewriting of section 5.12 of the zoning ordinance, which specifically addresses recreational vehicles. And at the time, there was a clause in there that had been approved by the county board that said temporary recreational vehicles cannot be used for vacation rentals. So it shows up there, and that's why it's also showing up here, so that we're reflecting the language and, you know, the permissibility or restrictions, so we're consistent.
And there are places in Cook County you can go to the rec park if you want to be hip and stay in an RV.
Yeah, well, I just found it I almost found it discriminatory against certain different property owners, you know, those with more money to build a full-on house with a full-on septic, they can do a vacation rental, but those with less money who are trying to get their foot in the door in the county and build their house while they're renting out their yurt can't do that. And I thought that was interesting. So that was my concern. I appreciate the consistency. I think maybe it'd be good to.
It's a future consideration. That's
It would be
your
good to
crystal
look at, yeah, in the future.
Interestingly enough, there are people renting tiny homes.
Oh, yeah.
Vacation rentals. And I believe the one that I'm thinking of actually has a portable toilet.
Sure.
And carry-in water.
Yep.
So you don't need to be upscale to do this, but we want to restrict it to, you know, what we call principal residences and habitable structures. That's why it excludes accessory structures, which can be garages, sheds, chicken coops, and these things.
Yeah. Well, I know people staying in accessory structures, so
It'd be
it's
really hip if you rented a chicken coop.
eggs in the morning.
So just a clarification that someone without a septic system, like Kerry water or gray water situation or outhouse, could qualify for rental property.
Let me open up another
Can of worms.
The Minnesota Department of Health licenses vacation rentals in Cook County. And I've been in touch with Sarah Bentz out of Duluth, who is a sanitarian, and she and a coworker cover all of Cook County as far as their licensing goes. When they license a vacation rental, they're looking at things like the size of the bedrooms, the egress windows, the condition of the septic system, and the well. They want to have well tests done annually and reported to them. So that's why we're not including this in our ordinance. We are saying that if people are getting a license from Cook County for their operation, they also need to have a license from the Minnesota Department of Health. So between the two of us, we should hopefully cover issues that would include sanitation, potable drinking water, and then any other issues that come up on the property.
So what is it? Is it Department of Health allowing facilities or a cabin that has, you know, carry-in water and an outhouse?
That's a good question. I mean, I honestly don't know. I haven't asked them that specifically.
Okay.
In fact, I just followed up on an email that I had got from Sarah Bentz about 3 weeks ago, and she said that she was going to send me a list of all of their license holders in Cook County. And when I get that, which I haven't received yet, I am going to compare it with our list first of all, just to see, you know, do they have everything that we have? I suspect they do not. I think there's properties, because they ask for people to contact them about getting a license. They don't necessarily look at websites and things and burrow into, you know, who is actually having operations or advertising in the county. So we want to work with them so that they can bring properties also into their licensing structure, so that they could be looking at septic and potable water issues too. Now, specifically on carry-in water and, you know, like a portable toilet, I'm not sure. That's a good question, and I'll have to follow
So,
up on that.
the proposed ordinance language 4.1F says they need to demonstrate that they have a license issued by the state,
Yep.
or a letter from the state saying they are not required to have a license. So, we can provide some more information about what the state requirements for licensure are and which people fall below the level of requiring one, but we're not issuing that determination. That's regulated by the state. So the fact it's in here says,
Good.
but context, it's a great question, and we can do some follow-up, but we're not going to be able to nail it down by individual piece. We're going to say that the property owner is responsible for being able to comply, or have a letter saying that, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the number of days that ends up being one of the primary issues related to whether a state's going to require a license or not. It's how often is it used for this purpose. So we can provide that context. But here, again, it's on the property owner to say, I have a license as required by the state, or I have a letter from the state saying I'm not required to have a license. The state's not going to like that, because they're not going to want to spend time writing letters saying you don't have to have a license. But I think it's really important for us to put it in right now, at least in these initial talks.
And I thought I remembered hearing that, no, that was not allowed by the state, but you could get around it if you didn't rent out more than 3 or 4 nights a week or something like that.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some flexibility there, but I could be
Weekends,
wrong there too, so.
Sarah Benz had sent me the form that they send to property owners in Cook County, that if they say, you know, I'd like to get a license from the Minnesota Department of Health. And it starts, the first paragraph says, any operator renting a home or cabin is required to obtain a lodging license prior to renting the unit to the public. I mean, that's, so I don't know, maybe there's a threshold below which they do not license. So far, I haven't found that, but I think they pretty much, if you're doing vacation rental licensing, you need a license from the Minnesota Department of Health.
Awesome.
There's a lot of regulatory authorities, there's a lot of different statutes that come into this. It's not just like any other Minnesota statutory issue. There's no clear right, wrong, direction answer. There's a lot of guidelines. But the primary issue is not regulating. I think environmental health and public safety related to environmental health is one of the primary reasons that these guys do what they do. And to protect our public waters specifically from sanitary waste is exactly why it's important that we have these resources. And it's not intended to be discriminatory. It's intended to make sure that we have good practice in place.
One more clarification. Cascade Vacation Rental controls 250 homes. They're going to be individually licensed, or is Cascade Vacation Rental a resort?
Well,
They are individually licensed.
they're individually licensed for property.
Under this ordinance, each property would be.
That's correct. I mean, it may end up, we work with the, Cascade Vacation Rentals, or any other agency or group that does that. But ultimately, every property is going to have a license.
Cascade Vacation Rentals was very intimately involved with our committee in working on this, so I truly appreciate their input on this committee. It was very helpful.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? So this is all new to us. Thank you for getting the first draft. I think when we read this over, we can contact you. Maybe Heidi will have input on the side, Jeff, but this is a lot to absorb, but it's good stuff to start with. And as far as moving it along, this was dated February 14th. Are you looking within the next month?
The next thing you'll see, Madam Chair, is you'll see a list of what we think the timeline is going to be. And as Tim Nelson is not in the office this week, we can't pin that down. And I want to thank both Joseph and Bill for standing in and answering these questions, because I really felt it was important for you to get a first look at this as early as possible in the process, as the issues Joseph brought up about January, February, March. The implementation of this may be 2019. It may be 2020. I mean, we've got to talk about the moving pieces, and the calendar is one of the moving pieces here. I'd rather that we do it right than that we get it done quickly. So we'll, the next thing you'll see is you're going to see a proposed timeline, which will include what the Planning Commission schedule will be related to this.
Okay. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Okay, so Jeff, do you want to talk about communications?
Thank you, Madam Chair. All I really want to do is I want to bring up, coming. I just want to show you the changes to the website that have been made. Something went wrong.
Maybe if we put this button right here.
Yeah, I should push that button.
It's a picture of Jeff climbing.
Rappelling.
Yosemite?
Mountain.
That looks like kitchen tile to me.
My computer never knows what it's doing with multiple displays.
Can all of our devices Miracast? Do you know?
Everything with the current operating system can.
Huh.
It has the ability to, whether or not it will.
Right.
Oh,
This is when he was climbing during the snowstorm.
this is when he was driving behind Dave.
A lot of snow. Works to me.
The rocky road ahead.
Loud cracking.
The most important thing to know, I guess I don't have to demonstrate it, is that in the last 10 days, we have added a human resource web page to the department web pages on the county website. So information that's available, we've gotten several data requests, and within the communications group, our goal has been to take general data requests and make them generally publicly available on the website. So things that have been added to the website through the HR website include the employee handbook, all of the employee contracts, a listing of the county employees who are not on one of the bargaining units. So all the jobs, all the job descriptions, all of the job classifications are now publicly available on the HR website, along with the 2019 wage scale, which is out there, so everybody can look and see what generally what everybody's making at any given point in time. So the ability for us to answer questions about what individuals are making, we can simply say, thank you for your request. The information is available on the county website under Human Resources. And our goal is that everybody should have access to the same publicly available information, much like the budget information we built out over the last 2 years. This year we added the HR stuff. The other components that are going to be built out are the public engagement piece. And the public engagement piece is going to be, it's going to have our data practices and data requests. It's also going to be the place where we're going to publicly answer the questions that are brought to us through you as commissioners, to us directly, and through public comment at meetings. We're going to intend to document and keep track of and make an FAQ of those issues and keep a running list of those on that website. So everything we put on the website will become searchable. So if somebody goes onto the website and searches YMCA contracts, they'll be able to pull up the YMCA contracts. They already can. That information is already there. We're just trying to reorder it in a way that makes it a little easier to find. So generally what we're trying to do is just make more information available frontline off the website. The other component, the other update is that notwithstanding a little glitch with the Public Health and Human Services agenda not being available through the Civic Web portal today, the board meetings, the soil and water meetings, the Planning Commission meetings, all are available. And the March Public Health meeting will be done on the agenda management system. So in March, when you go to the county website and you click on the button Agendas and Minutes, it's going to take you to a landing page where you're going to, instead of seeing Board of Commissioners, Public Health and Human Services, Soil and Water, and Planning Commission, you're going to see, continue to the Civic Web portal, and then you're going to see the archives of 2018 and back, so people can still assess the history and the archive boards and minutes. But going forward, they'll go to the Civic Web portal, and you guys, I'll email that out to you so you can all take a look at that and see what's available out there. The really nice public components of that portal is that members of the public can go out and subscribe to the meetings that they want updates on. So that they get an email that says, if they subscribe and they have the technology and they want to do it that way, they'll get they'll know the meeting has been published. They'll know that the agenda has been amended. They'll know that the minutes are available for that meeting. Our ability is a self-subscription service. Our intention is to subscribe the boards for each of the active meetings. You don't get a choice. We're going to subscribe you. But the public can self-subscribe to any of the meetings that they want to follow. And that will, so we should be rolling that out in March, and people will be able to see that. You've seen the format because the agenda for today's meeting, the agenda for last week's board meeting have all been done using that new format. Do you have any questions about the HR or the agenda management portion?
I don't have any questions, but I think that sounds like a lot of progress, just getting all that information out, and it makes a lot of sense.
Push it out there.
Well, yeah, if there is an individual who is doing a data request, it is likely that other individuals would like to know that information as well, so I'm really happy to hear that.
Yep, I think it's a good move.
Yeah, good policy.
Make us more transparent.
Good policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last item on this agenda is not intended that the reports from the standing committees, just as a general practice going forward as a part of the committee of the whole, we will be attaching the minutes of the standing committees, personnel, public safety and transportation, and general government, so that the public can see a record of the work that's happening in the standard committees, even though as a committee meeting with less than a quorum, it's not a public meeting, the work done in those meetings becomes the policy considerations at committee of the whole or board of commissioners. So I think it's really important for us to make sure that those minutes come forward in a way like this through this public document that's available to everybody. So just as in January there was no general government meeting, there was a personnel committee meeting, but because Judy was on vacation last week, the minutes were complete and available. So they'll be appended to next month's committee of the whole. So that's just a new part of the committee of the whole, is sharing with the rest of the commissioners and the public the work that's being done in the standing committees. Again, just a point of transparency. Our goal was not ever to not make it public, it's just that we didn't create a mechanism to specifically make each of those pieces of information public until now.
Jeff, when we do this, I saw the comment for information only. Are we at any point with any of these, do we have the liberty as commissioners, which I assume is to ask some questions about those things, or are they just for information only? I mean, could that be part of our agenda?
That is completely up to you, Commissioner. I think that's a valid,
Okay.
that's a valid question. And the answer is, I don't know. Do you want to do that at this meeting? By making that available, my office is available to answer questions. You don't go to the personnel meetings, but maybe you have a question about something that happened at personnel, and vice versa. Commissioner Dukirk doesn't attend the public safety and transportation meetings and may have a question about that. My office is always available to clarify questions
Okay.
about that information.
So would
as it
you
comes
rather
up.
have it go through there or come up right here?
I would rather that you ask the question when and where you think it's most appropriate.
Okay.
So if you just have a question about something, feel free to contact me. If you want to make sure that you have the full board think about a question that you have related to a topic, this may be a great place to bring it up. I didn't want to put it on there and have it be thought of as an item for general discussion. That doesn't mean you might not have a question about it.
Well, I have a comment, if I could, since I'm quoted, and I think that this was a very good summary, but I have had some people in the public contact me about my statement on the jail study. And I just wanted to clarify that we started with the concept of Justice Center, and when we talked about Justice Center, we were talking about adding offices or court services, as a lot of counties have done, as well as an expanded jail and remodel. And now we are at a point where we're not including court services and in our planning. That was a decision we made. So I just wanted to clarify that. Because some people said, well, is this court thing back in again? And I said, no. And so that hopefully will clarify that. But also, I think I just heard so much about a jail thing and the remodel or expansion of, that portion of that facility to be used by our officers and staff is definitely part of this. It's just not a jail addition that's the topic of discussion.
From a process standpoint, since we're going to be printing these minutes, we should make sure that as they're distributed internally, that you have an opportunity to review them before they're added here.
Okay.
So the public safety and transportation minutes are distributed by Lisa Sorley a couple of days after the meeting
Sure,
is held,
yeah.
and it's very important to
I
read those
just
and provide
didn't
any
get
comments.
them.
Yep.
For some reason this time, and I
Okay.
had to go online, and I got them
Okay.
the other day. But it's not a problem. It's just I wanted to just clarify my context of that.
Okay.
So I'm on the AMC's Public Safety Committee. I feel a little disconnect for having a Public Safety and Transportation Committee here that I wouldn't be on, but I would be on the AMC. Does that kind of how things kind of shake out in general, though? Okay.
They don't necessarily correlate. If you looked at the issues that come to our Public Safety and Transportation Committee meeting are, over the past 2 years, it was related to the tower ordinance and the tower contracts and the tower policy, and that really wouldn't correlate to an AMC level platform. So a lot of our stuff at these local committee levels are about our business, independent of AMC priorities. It's a good question, and it's not something you don't want to consider, but at this point, the committee makeup could be changed at any given point in time.
Sure. I was just asking perspective.
If I could just comment, I mean, maybe at some point in time, we say, okay, well, maybe we should switch something. That way it wouldn't involve a third commissioner, it'd be a lot easier, but when you get into the domino effect,
Right,
you
right.
have to start all over again, so, but that's a good point.
I bring lots of issues to the Public Safety Committee, and I can't go because I'd be the third commissioner, so I just trust that they're taking care of all of Heidi's issues.
We consider them.
Okay. All righty, thank everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jenny.
Is the city going to handle